A woodpecker can strike a tree hard enough for its head to decelerate with hundreds of times the force of gravity, then repeat the impact again and again. By human standards, that is a guaranteed brain injury. The usual explanation is that woodpeckers possess a shock-absorbing skull, perhaps reinforced by the tongue wrapping around the brain. The best direct evidence now suggests almost the opposite. A woodpecker's head behaves like a stiff hammer. Its survival depends less on cushioning the impact than on its small brain, the brief duration of each strike, and the geometry of its head. Woodpeckers strike wood for several different reasons. They tap and probe while searching for insects, use more forceful blows to excavate feeding and nesting cavities, and produce rapid bursts of drumming to communicate. Drumming is the equivalent of birdsong, rather than an attempt to open the tree, which is why woodpeckers sometimes choose hollow branches, metal gutters, or other especially resonant surfaces. In each case, the bird first establishes a stable platform. Strong, gripping feet anchor it to the trunk, while stiff tail feathers press against the bark as an additional support. Powerful neck muscles then accelerate the head towards the surface, and the narrow, chisel-like beak concentrates that movement onto a small area. When the beak hits, some of its kinetic energy fractures or deforms the wood, some become sound and heat, and the remainder rapidly decelerates the head. This creates a problem for the traditional shock absorber explanation. If tissues between the beak and braincase absorbed a large part of the impact, less energy would reach the tree. That might protect the brain, but it would also produce a worse hammer. A woodpecker trying to excavate wood benefits from transmitting as much of the strike as possible through the beak. In 2022, researchers tested this using high-speed footage of black, pileated, and great-spotted woodpeckers. They tracked several points on each bird's beak and head during impact. If the skull acted as a shock absorber, the braincase should have decelerated less sharply than the beak. Instead, the different parts of the head stopped at almost the same rate. The head behaved as a stiff, connected structure, efficiently transmitting the impact rather than cushioning it before it reached the brain. This does not mean the unusual anatomy of a woodpecker's head is irrelevant. Its skull and beak must withstand repeated loading without cracking or bending excessively. Woodpeckers also possess a greatly elongated hyoid apparatus, the structure supporting the tongue, which curves around the skull and allows the tongue to extend deep into holes. This structure is often described as a safety belt around the brain. However, there is no convincing direct evidence that it functions as a major shock absorber. Its clearly demonstrated role is operating the highly specialized tongue. So if the brain experiences almost the same deceleration as the beak, why is it not immediately injured? The most important difference is scale. A woodpecker's brain is tiny compared with a human brain. During rapid linear deceleration, pressure develops across the brain in the direction of the impact. The greater the distance across the brain, the larger this pressure difference can become. Because a woodpecker's brain is extremely short from front to back, the same acceleration produces a much smaller internal pressure gradient than it would across a human brain. The shape and orientation of the brain also spread the load across a relatively broad area of the skull. Each impact lasts only a few milliseconds, and biological tissues can generally tolerate a brief pulse of acceleration better than the same loading sustained for longer. Computer models based on recorded woodpecker strikes found that even the hardest impacts measured remained below the brain pressures associated with mild concussion in primates. The acceleration numbers sound catastrophic because they are being compared with a much larger animal. The same number of grams does not create the same injury risk at every scale. The bird's controlled technique also helps. Its feet, tail, neck, and head work together to direct the strike into the tree while limiting unstable sideways movement. The system is not designed to eliminate force. It is designed to apply that force predictably and remain within the limits of the bird's tissues. That does not necessarily mean repeated pecking has no biological effect at all. A small study of preserved woodpecker brains found deposits containing tau, a protein associated with repeated brain trauma in humans, which were absent from the comparison birds. However, this does not prove that woodpeckers suffer concussion or a bird equivalent of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Tau has normal biological functions, and its significance in healthy woodpeckers remains uncertain. What the impact measurements do show is that woodpeckers do not need a soft internal helmet to survive normal pecking. Their skull functions as a hammer, their beak functions as a chisel, and their small brain remains below the damaging limits reached much sooner by a larger animal. The woodpecker survives not because the impact disappears, but because its entire body is built to deliver it.